The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden streaks across the polished showroom floor of Prestige Motors, one of the most exclusive luxury car dealerships in the city. Sleek sports cars glimmered under spotlights, their flawless surfaces reflecting the awe of wealthy patrons who wandered through the space with an air of entitlement. This was a place where dreams came true, if you had the means to afford them. For Jake and Ryan Caldwell, however, it was less about dreams and more about mischief. The teenage brothers, aged 16 and 18 respectively, were known for their playful antics and insatiable curiosity. Sons of billionaire entrepreneur Mr. Harrison Caldwell, they lived lives most people could only fantasize about: lavish homes, private schools, and access to virtually anything money could buy. Yet, despite their privileged upbringing, Jake and Ryan weren't spoiled brats. They were spirited, fun-loving kids who sometimes pushed boundaries without fully considering the consequences. Their father, Harrison Caldwell, was a man of contrasts, fiercely successful yet remarkably humble. A self-made billionaire who started his empire from scratch, he valued hard work, integrity, and treating others with respect regardless of their station in life. He often reminded his sons that wealth wasn't just about material possessions. It was about using resources wisely and making a positive impact on the world. But today, those lessons seemed far from Jake and Ryan's minds as they hatched a plan to visit Prestige Motors. "Dad won't even notice we're gone," Jake said with a grin, tossing a set of keys into the air. "Besides, how often do we get to see these beasts up close?" Ryan chuckled, adjusting his baseball cap. "Yeah, and maybe we can finally figure out why anyone would spend $500,000 on a car." What started as innocent curiosity quickly turned into something more mischievous. Without telling their father or seeking permission, the boys borrowed one of the family's chauffeur-driven cars and headed to the dealership. They walked in like they owned the place, laughing loudly, snapping pictures, and pretending to haggle over prices. To the staff, they looked like troublemakers, kids playing dress-up in a world meant for adults. At first, the employees tried to ignore them, hoping they'd grow bored and leave. But when Jake climbed into a Ferrari and honked its horn, drawing stares from other customers, patience wore thin. A manager approached, his tone sharp and dismissive. "I'm sorry, boys, but this isn't a playground. You'll need to leave." Humiliated and angry, Jake and Ryan stormed out, muttering curses under their breath. Little did they, or the dealership staff, know that this was only the beginning of a lesson none of them would soon forget. Because tomorrow, 2 gleaming Rolls-Royce cars would pull up to Prestige Motors, and everything was about to change. The moment Jake and Ryan stepped into Prestige Motors, they were struck by the sheer opulence of the place. Every surface gleamed under carefully positioned lights, from the marble floors to the glass walls displaying rows of exotic cars. The air carried the faint scent of leather and polish, a testament to the meticulous care given to each vehicle. It was like stepping into another world, one where money flowed freely and luxury knew no bounds. For Jake and Ryan, it was both thrilling and surreal. "This place is insane," Ryan whispered, his eyes wide as he took in the sight of a Bugatti Chiron parked proudly at the center of the showroom. Its price tag, $3 million, was displayed casually on a plaque beside it, as if such sums were commonplace. "Let's see how fast this thing goes," Jake joked, hopping into the driver's seat of a nearby Lamborghini Aventador. He gripped the steering wheel dramatically, mimicking race car sound effects while Ryan laughed and snapped photos on his phone. Their antics drew curious glances from other customers, many of whom were dressed impeccably in tailored suits or designer dresses. But the staff quickly grew wary. One salesperson, a middle-aged man named Greg, approached them with a forced smile. "Hey there, guys. Can I help you with anything?" Jake smirked, leaning back in the leather seat. "Yeah, we're thinking of buying this one." "How much for the Lambo?" Greg hesitated, clearly skeptical. "Well, it starts at around $400,000. Are your parents here with you today?" Ryan snorted. "Nah, we've got our own cash." The sarcasm wasn't lost on Greg, whose patience began to wear thin. "Look, these cars are very delicate. Maybe you should check out something more practical." "Oh, come on," Jake protested, climbing out of the car. "You don't think we can afford it?" What if we wrote you a check right now? Greg sighed, rubbing his temples. Listen, kids, I don't have time for games. If you're not serious buyers, I'll have to ask you to leave. His tone sparked defiance in the boys. They wandered further into the showroom, deliberately making noise as they went. Jake honked the horn of a Ferrari 812 Superfast, causing several heads to turn in irritation. Ryan leaned against a Maserati, pretending to negotiate a deal with an imaginary salesman. I'll give you $5 for this beauty, he said loudly, earning chuckles from a few bystanders but icy stares from the staff. Tension escalated when Jake accidentally knocked over a decorative vase while gesturing wildly during one of his jokes. The crash echoed through the silent showroom, drawing gasps from nearby patrons. Greg rushed over, his face red with frustration. That's it. You two need to go. Now. But we didn't even break it, Jake protested, pointing at the intact pieces scattered across the floor. It doesn't matter, Greg snapped. You've caused enough trouble. Security will escort you out. Within minutes, 2 burly security guards appeared, flanking the boys as they were marched toward the exit. Jake and Ryan tried to protest, insisting they hadn't done anything wrong, but their words fell on deaf ears. As the glass doors closed behind them, they stood on the sidewalk, seething with embarrassment and anger. This is ridiculous, Ryan muttered, kicking a pebble. They treated us like criminals just because we're teenagers. Yeah, and did you see how fake nice that guy was? Like we weren't even worth his time, Jake added, crossing his arms. Though they joked about getting revenge, deep down the experience stung. For all their bravado, they couldn't shake the feeling of being dismissed and disrespected. What bothered them most wasn't just being kicked out. It was the assumption that they didn't belong there, that their presence somehow tarnished the dealership's pristine image. Unbeknownst to them, their father would soon hear about the incident, and his reaction would turn everything upside down. Back at the Caldwell estate, Jake and Ryan stormed into the living room, their faces flushed with indignation. Harrison Caldwell looked up from his laptop, raising an eyebrow at their disheveled appearance. You two look like you've been wrestling bears, he said dryly, setting aside his work. Dad, you won't believe what happened, Jake blurted out, pacing the room. We went to Prestige Motors today, just to check it out, and they treated us like garbage. Harrison leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in his lap. Oh, do tell. Ryan jumped in, gesturing animatedly as he recounted the story. They acted like we were some kind of troublemakers. We weren't doing anything crazy, just looking around and having a little fun. But this guy, Greg or whatever, kept giving us dirty looks and telling us to leave. Then security showed up and practically threw us out. And they didn't even apologize, Jake added, throwing his hands up. It's like they assumed we were just there to waste their time because we're teenagers. Harrison listened intently, his expression unreadable. When they finished, he let out a slow breath. I see. So, you think they judged you unfairly? Yes, both boys exclaimed in unison. Harrison nodded thoughtfully, stroking his chin. Well, first things first, you shouldn't have gone there without permission. And climbing into cars, honking horns, and pretending to haggle? That wasn't exactly respectful behavior. Jake and Ryan exchanged guilty glances but quickly recovered. Yeah, maybe we got carried away, Ryan admitted grudgingly. But still, Dad, they could have handled it better. They didn't even try to talk to us. They just kicked us out like we were criminals. Harrison studied his sons for a moment, seeing the mix of frustration and hurt behind their bravado. He knew this was more than just teenage rebellion. It was a lesson waiting to be taught. All right, he said finally, standing up. Let me ask you something. Do you really believe they treated you poorly because of your age? Or do you think it might have had something to do with how you presented yourselves? The boys frowned, unsure how to respond. Harrison continued. People make snap judgments all the time, often based on appearances or actions. Sometimes those judgments are unfair, yes, but sometimes they're not entirely wrong either. If you want to be taken seriously, you need to act in a way that commands respect. Jake opened his mouth to argue, but Harrison held up a hand. That said, I agree that being dismissed outright isn't acceptable. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of who they are or seem to be. Which is why I think it's time for a little experiment. The boys perked up, intrigued. What kind of experiment? Ryan asked cautiously. Harrison smiled faintly, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Tomorrow morning, we're going to pay Prestige Motors a visit. Together. Jake and Ryan exchanged excited grins, imagining their father storming into the dealership and demanding apologies. But Harrison shook his head. Not quite what you're thinking. We're not going there to confront anyone, at least not directly. Instead, we'll observe how they treat different types of customers. You'll see firsthand whether their behavior yesterday was truly about prejudice or something else entirely. The next morning, the Caldwell family arrived at Prestige Motors in style. 2 gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom sedans pulled up to the entrance, drawing immediate attention. Passers-by stopped to gawk, and dealership staff rushed outside to greet them, their faces lighting up with anticipation. As Harrison stepped out of the lead car, dressed in a tailored suit and exuding quiet authority, the transformation in the staff's demeanor was unmistakable. Gone were the dismissive glances and icy tones. Instead, they fawned over him, offering champagne, private tours, and promises of exclusive deals. Even Greg, the same man who had ejected Jake and Ryan the day before, was now all smiles, practically bowing as he welcomed Harrison inside. Jake and Ryan watched in stunned silence as their father effortlessly commanded the room. Employees scrambled to accommodate his every request, treating him like royalty. Meanwhile, other customers lingered awkwardly in the background, clearly aware they'd been overshadowed by the VIP guest. Finally, Harrison turned to Greg, his tone polite but probing. So, tell me, how do you handle situations when a customer doesn't meet expectations? Say, someone who might not fit the typical profile of your clientele. Greg hesitated, clearly caught off guard. Well, we aim to provide excellent service to everyone, no matter who they are. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Interesting, because yesterday, my sons visited your dealership, and apparently they were treated rather poorly. Would you care to explain that? The color drained from Greg's face as realization dawned. He stammered, glancing nervously at Jake and Ryan, who stood smirking behind their father. It seems, Harrison continued calmly, that your team made assumptions about them based on their age and behavior. Assumptions that may have cost you a valuable opportunity. After all, you never know who might walk through your doors. The arrival of the 2 Rolls-Royce Phantoms at Prestige Motors was nothing short of cinematic. The sleek, silver-gray vehicles glided to a stop in front of the dealership's glass entrance, their polished surfaces gleaming under the morning sun. Passers-by paused mid-stride, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the iconic luxury cars. Even the valets, usually unflappable, exchanged wide-eyed glances as they scrambled to figure out who, or what, had just descended upon them. Inside the showroom, the staff buzzed with nervous energy. When word spread that not 1 but 2 Rolls-Royces had pulled up, everyone snapped into high alert. Salespeople adjusted their ties, managers smoothed their jackets, and even the receptionists sat up straighter, bracing for whoever might emerge from those opulent vehicles. And then he stepped out. Harrison Caldwell exited the lead car with an air of understated elegance. His tailored navy suit fit him perfectly, and his presence commanded immediate respect without a single word spoken. As he turned to help his wife, Evelyn, out of the second Rolls-Royce, the entire dealership seemed to hold its breath. Jake and Ryan followed close behind, their earlier mischief replaced by quiet confidence as they trailed their father like heirs to a throne. "Good morning," Harrison greeted the approaching staff, his tone warm yet authoritative. "Thank you for accommodating us on such short notice." The manager, a middle-aged man named Paul, practically tripped over himself to shake Harrison's hand. "Mr. Caldwell, it's an honor to have you here. Please, let me show you around personally." Paul gestured toward the showroom, where employees were already rearranging displays to ensure everything looked impeccable. Champagne flutes materialized as if by magic, carried by waitstaff summoned specifically for this occasion. Meanwhile, Greg, The same salesperson who had dismissed Jake and Ryan the day before, hovered anxiously nearby, clearly hoping to stay out of sight. As Paul led the group through the showroom, he spared no expense in showcasing the finest offerings. He pointed out limited edition models, explained cutting-edge technology, and even offered test drives of certain vehicles, all while gushing about the exclusivity and craftsmanship of each car. Jake and Ryan exchanged amused glances, watching the staff bend over backward to impress their father. "They're really laying it on thick, huh?" Ryan whispered to Jake, earning a suppressed snicker in response. But Harrison wasn't there to be impressed. After allowing the charade to play out for a few minutes, he stopped abruptly in front of a Bugatti Veyron. Turning to Paul, he said calmly, "Tell me something. How do you determine which customers deserve your attention?" Paul blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Well, Mr. Caldwell, we strive to provide exceptional service to everyone who walks through our doors." "Is that so?" Harrison replied, his voice smooth but probing. "Because yesterday, my sons visited your dealership, and I understand they weren't treated quite as warmly as I am today." A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to Greg, whose face turned beet red as he realized the game was up. He stepped forward hesitantly, sweat forming on his brow. "Sir, I'm sorry if there was any misunderstanding. We didn't realize that they were my sons?" Harrison finished for him, his tone sharpening slightly. "Or perhaps you assumed they couldn't afford anything here and decided they weren't worth your time." Greg stammered, unable to meet Harrison's gaze. "No, sir, that's not." "Let me make something clear," Harrison interrupted, his voice firm but measured. "Wealth isn't defined by what someone wears or how old they are. It's about character, integrity, and how you treat others, even when you think no one's watching. Yesterday, you judged my boys based on appearances and acted accordingly. Today, you're rolling out the red carpet because you see a billionaire standing before you. But tell me, what makes me any more deserving of respect than anyone else?" The room was silent except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Employees shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact as Harrison's words sank in. Jake and Ryan watched their father with newfound admiration. For all their earlier frustration, they now understood the deeper lesson he was imparting. Not just to the dealership staff, but to themselves. Harrison continued, softening his tone slightly. "I built my success from nothing, and along the way, I learned that true wealth isn't about owning expensive things. It's about using what you have to lift others up. Respect is free, it doesn't cost a dime, yet it can mean everything to someone. If you want to succeed in business and in life, you must treat every person who walks through your doors as if they matter. Because they do." Paul nodded vigorously, beads of sweat trickling down his temples. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Caldwell. We'll take immediate steps to ensure this never happens again." Harrison gave him a curt nod, then turned to leave. As the family climbed back into their Rolls-Royces, the dealership staff stood frozen, staring after them in stunned silence. Jake leaned forward, grinning at his father. "That was awesome, Dad. Did you see the look on Greg's face?" Harrison chuckled softly, his expression thoughtful. "Remember this moment, boys. Power isn't about showing people who's boss. It's about teaching them how to be better." As the Rolls-Royces drove away, the staff inside Prestige Motors began whispering among themselves, vowing to change their ways. Little did they know, the ripple effects of Harrison Caldwell's visit would extend far beyond their showroom floor. The fallout from Harrison Caldwell's visit to Prestige Motors began almost immediately. As the Rolls-Royces disappeared down the street, the dealership staff erupted into a flurry of panicked whispers. Paul, the manager, gathered his team in the conference room, his face pale with anxiety. "We need to fix this now," he said, pacing back and forth. "If word gets out that we treated Mr. Caldwell's sons poorly, it could destroy our reputation." Greg slumped in his chair, visibly shaken. "I didn't know they were his kids," he protested weakly. "They were acting like troublemakers, climbing into cars, making noise. I thought they were just messing around." Paul shot him a sharp look. "It doesn't matter what you thought. We represent this brand, and our job is to treat every customer with respect. no matter who they are or how they behave. You judge them based on age and attitude instead of giving them the benefit of the doubt. That's unacceptable. One of the newer sales associates raised her hand hesitantly. But isn't it also partly their fault? They weren't exactly polite. Paul sighed, rubbing his temples. Yes, maybe they acted immaturely, but that doesn't excuse us treating them like criminals. Mr. Caldwell made a valid point. Respect costs nothing, and we failed at that yesterday. Moving forward, we need to do better. By the end of the meeting, Paul had outlined several changes. Mandatory customer service training for all employees, stricter guidelines for handling difficult situations, and a new policy ensuring no one would be turned away without proper cause. He even assigned Greg the task of personally apologizing to Jake and Ryan, a punishment the humiliated salesman reluctantly accepted. Meanwhile, back at the Caldwell estate, Jake and Ryan couldn't stop talking about what had happened. That was epic, Dad, Jake said, still grinning as they sat around the dining table. Greg looked like he wanted to crawl under a rock. Harrison smiled faintly but quickly shifted the conversation. Before you two get too smug, let's talk about your role in all this. Yes, the dealership staff made mistakes, but so did you. Ryan frowned, leaning back in his chair. What do you mean? We weren't that bad. Weren't you? Harrison countered gently. Climbing into expensive cars, honking horns, joking loudly. Those actions set the tone for how people perceived you. If you want to be taken seriously, you have to act in a way that earns respect. Humor and curiosity are fine, but there's a time and place for everything. Jake and Ryan exchanged guilty glances. Their father was right. They hadn't exactly been model customers. Still, Ryan couldn't resist pointing out, but they still shouldn't have kicked us out like that. They didn't even give us a chance to explain. You're absolutely correct, Harrison agreed. And that's why I stepped in, to show them the error of their ways. However, it's important to recognize that respect goes both ways. Just as they misjudged you, you gave them reasons to doubt your intentions. The key takeaway here is accountability. Everyone makes mistakes, but what matters most is learning from them. Evelyn, Harrison's wife and the boy's mother, chimed in softly. Your father's trying to teach you something bigger than just dealing with a car dealership. Life will always present opportunities to grow, whether it's through success or failure. What defines you isn't how you start. It's how you respond when things go wrong. The boys nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of their parents' words. For all their initial outrage over being dismissed, they now understood the broader lesson. Humility, self-awareness, and empathy are essential traits for navigating the world. The next day, Greg arrived at the Caldwell residence, looking like a man headed to his own execution. He rang the doorbell nervously, clutching a handwritten apology letter addressed to Jake and Ryan. When Evelyn answered, she ushered him inside with surprising warmth. Thank you for coming, she said kindly. They're upstairs finishing homework, but they'll be down soon. As Greg waited in the living room, he rehearsed his apology silently, dreading the encounter. When Jake and Ryan finally appeared, their expressions were unreadable. Greg swallowed hard and extended the letter. I'm really sorry about what happened, he stammered. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. It was wrong, and I hope you can forgive me. To his surprise, Jake took the letter and gave him a small smile. Thanks for coming. And yeah, apology accepted. Ryan added, just don't judge other teenagers so harshly next time. Okay? Greg nodded fervently, relief washing over him. You have my word. After he left, Harrison joined the boys in the living room, raising an eyebrow. Well, how'd it go? He seemed sincere, Ryan admitted. Kinda pitiful, actually. Harrison chuckled. Good. Remember, forgiveness is powerful. It gives people a chance to change. Use this experience to reflect on your own behavior and strive to be better. That's how you leave a lasting impact. Over the following weeks, Prestige Motors underwent significant changes. Employee training programs emphasized inclusivity and respect, while managers implemented systems to ensure fair treatment for all customers. Word spread about Harrison Caldwell's visit and the lessons it imparted, inspiring other dealerships to reevaluate their practices. For Jake and Ryan, the incident became a turning point. They began approaching life with greater maturity, balancing their playful nature with a newfound sense of responsibility. Whether interacting with peers, teachers, or strangers, they carried themselves differently, more mindful of how their actions influenced others. And Harrison? He watched his sons grow with quiet pride, knowing he'd planted seeds of integrity and compassion that would guide them long after the memory of luxury cars and gleaming Rolls-Royces faded. In the weeks following the incident at Prestige Motors, Jake and Ryan noticed a subtle but profound shift, not just in themselves, but in the world around them. The dealership staff, once dismissive and aloof, transformed into paragons of professionalism and kindness. Employees greeted every customer warmly, regardless of age or appearance, and went out of their way to ensure everyone felt valued. When Jake and Ryan visited again with their father, they were met with genuine smiles and enthusiastic service, a stark contrast to their previous experience. Greg, in particular, seemed determined to make amends. He greeted the boys warmly, treating them not as troublemakers but as valued patrons. "If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know," he said earnestly, his earlier arrogance replaced by humility. While Jake and Ryan initially found it amusing to see him grovel, they soon realized that Greg's change wasn't merely performative, it was heartfelt. His apology had been sincere, and his actions since then reflected a deeper understanding of the importance of respect and fairness. The ripple effects of Harrison Caldwell's visit extended far beyond Prestige Motors. Word of the billionaire's lesson spread through local business circles, sparking conversations about customer service, classism, and integrity. Other dealerships began adopting similar training programs, emphasizing inclusivity and empathy. Social media buzzed with stories of people inspired by the Caldwell family's approach to conflict resolution, sharing anecdotes of their own experiences with prejudice and how they planned to address it moving forward. For Jake and Ryan, the most significant changes occurred within themselves. They started applying their father's teachings to everyday situations. Whether it was standing up for a bullied classmate, apologizing after a heated argument, or simply taking the time to listen instead of jumping to conclusions. Their newfound maturity earned them respect from peers and teachers alike, transforming their reputations from mischievous troublemakers to thoughtful leaders. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Evelyn brought up the topic of growth. "You two have come such a long way since that day at the dealership," she remarked, smiling at her sons. "I'm proud of how you've handled everything." Ryan shrugged, though a hint of pride crept into his voice. "Yeah, I guess we learned a lot. It's easy to blame other people when things go wrong, but sometimes you have to look at yourself too." Jake nodded in agreement. "And Dad's right, respect really does cost nothing. If we want people to treat us fairly, we have to start by treating them the same way." Harrison listened quietly, his expression softening as he watched his sons articulate these lessons on their own. He leaned back in his chair, raising his glass. "To growth," he said simply, prompting the rest of the family to join in the toast. Later that night, as Harrison tucked the boys into bed, a tradition he'd maintained even as they grew older, he paused in the doorway of Jake's room. "Remember this," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Every choice you make shapes who you become. Use your privilege wisely, and never underestimate the power of a single act of kindness or a single moment of accountability." The next morning, Jake and Ryan woke up early, eager to tackle the day ahead. They volunteered at a community center helping underprivileged kids learn coding skills, an initiative inspired by their father's emphasis on giving back. As they worked alongside their peers, laughing and teaching, they realized something remarkable. The lessons they'd learned weren't confined to luxury showrooms or high-stakes confrontations. They applied everywhere, in classrooms, parks, workplaces, and homes. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the Caldwell estate, Harrison stood on the balcony overlooking the sprawling gardens. Evelyn joined him, handing him a cup of tea. "You did good, Harrison," she said softly. "They're going to be amazing men because of you." He smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "They already are." Below them, Jake and Ryan played basketball with neighborhood friends, their laughter echoing through the crisp evening air. For all their youthful energy and occasional mischief, they carried themselves with a quiet confidence that spoke volumes about the values instilled in them. They were still learning, still growing, but they were well on their way to becoming the kind of people who could change the world, one small act of kindness at a time. Months turned into a year, and the story of Harrison Caldwell's visit to Prestige Motors became more than just a cautionary tale. It evolved into a legacy of humility and integrity. The dealership itself underwent a remarkable transformation, earning accolades for its improved customer service and inclusive practices. Once known solely for catering to the elite, Prestige Motors now prided itself on welcoming customers from all walks of life, ensuring that every individual felt respected and valued. Greg, the salesperson who had initially dismissed Jake and Ryan, emerged as one of the most empathetic members of the staff. His interactions with clients were marked by genuine warmth and attentiveness, qualities he credited to the lesson he'd learned from Harrison. "That day changed my perspective," he often told new hires during training sessions. "We're not just selling cars, we're building relationships. And those relationships start with respect." The impact extended far beyond the dealership. Local businesses began implementing similar changes, inspired by the narrative of accountability and compassion. Social media campaigns highlighted stories of individuals going out of their way to treat others kindly, using hashtags like #RespectCostsNothing and #BeTheChange. Harrison Caldwell's name became synonymous with leadership rooted in humility, and his story was featured in interviews, articles, and even school curriculums focused on ethics and empathy. For Jake and Ryan, the journey of growth continued to shape their lives in profound ways. They graduated high school with honors, earning recognition not only for their academic achievements but also for their commitment to community service. Together, they launched an initiative called Wheels of Change, a program aimed at teaching underprivileged youth technical skills related to automotive repair and design. The project quickly gained traction, supported by local mechanics, educators, and philanthropists, including their father. Harrison watched with pride as his sons embraced their roles as leaders and changemakers. He often joined them at events hosted by Wheels of Change, where teenagers tinkered with engines or designed concept cars under their guidance. One evening, after such an event, Jake approached his father with a thoughtful expression. "Dad, do you think we'll ever measure up to everything you've done?" Harrison chuckled, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "You already have, and then some. Success isn't about measuring yourself against someone else. It's about staying true to your values and making a difference in whatever way you can." Ryan chimed in, grinning. "Yeah, but let's be real. Our projects probably won't involve Rolls-Royces anytime soon." Harrison laughed, shaking his head. "It's not about the cars, boys. It's about what you leave behind, how you make people feel, how you inspire them to be better. That's the mark of true success." As the years passed, Jake and Ryan carried these lessons into adulthood, pursuing careers driven by purpose rather than profit. Jake became an advocate for equitable education, working to bridge gaps in access to technology and resources. Ryan followed in his father's entrepreneurial footsteps, founding a sustainable energy startup that prioritized ethical practices and community engagement. Both brothers remained grounded, never forgetting the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. Meanwhile, Harrison stepped back from the spotlight, content to watch his legacy unfold through the actions of his children and the countless lives they touched. He spent his days mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing stories of resilience and integrity, and reminding them that wealth is meaningless without character. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Harrison strolled through the gardens of his estate, he paused beneath a towering oak tree. Beneath its branches sat Jake and Ryan, now grown men, laughing with their own children as they played tag. Watching them, Harrison felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. His sons weren't just reflections of him. They were extensions of his values, carrying forward a legacy built on kindness, humility, and accountability. And as the golden sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows across the lawn, Harrison smiled softly. In that moment, he knew he had succeeded not as a billionaire but as a father. His work wasn't done, nor would it ever truly end. But the foundation had been laid. A foundation strong enough to withstand time, adversity, and change. Because in the end, it wasn't about the cars, the money, or the fame. It was about leaving the world a little better than they found it. One act of respect, one moment of grace, and one humble choice at a time.